Ever since I bailed on that old situation, life has been great. I wake up every morning and breathe in the fresh air, knowing that all of my problems are behind me and will never bother me again.
And I owe it all to you.
Thank you, Joseph. So we've been able to identify everything but his new residence?
Yes, our trackers always seem to lose him before he goes home.
Do you think it's some sort of invisibility cloak?
We assume it is actually teleportation. Our bloodhounds lose his scent when he disappears.
And the robot? Any word on it?
He took it to a basilisk shop, of all places. We've been torturing the owner for the last 6 hours. I doubt he will break anytime soon.
How do we know he won't get those Roko creeps looking into our business?
The longer we hold him, the more likely his cult buddies will come looking. Therefore, we'll be releasing him shortly. A batch of our modified Rohypnol treatment is being prepared to ensure this experience is nothing but a bad dream. Anyway, may I ask for your plan of action with the hipster?
We know Nerd's typical haunts when he's in public. What I plan to do is earn his trust. And once we have that, we systematically eliminate his friends in front of him before giving him a pair of cement socks. Perhaps we extend an olive branch to him with a few job opportunities. Now then, about the mayor. We need him eliminated as soon as possible.
Wow, this bitch needs to work on her combo game.
Nihilistic nerd, I presume.
Who's asking?
I've come bearing a message from my boss, Large Letty. He wishes to make amends with you. He's offering $10,000 as well as another $10,000 for a little job. That is, if you're willing.
Show me the money.
A couple years ago, I was browsing Steam, looking for a reason to waste my money. This is when I came across Slave Zero X. The game just looked cool, so I wishlisted it and forgot about it, until February of this year, when the game launched. So I picked it up, but I was working on another review at the time, so I hadn't had the time to play the game. That is, until now. Slave Zero X was made by Poppyworks, a very small indie studio with experience in multiple facets of game design. This studio has worked on a few other games that range from positive to very positive on Steam. They have also made games on multiple consoles. I should also mention that Slave Zero X is a prequel to a game known as Slave Zero. Slave Zero was originally launched on the Dreamcast and PC back in the day. I never played that game, so I'm not going to bother comparing the two, aside from the fact that the original appears to be a third-person mecha shooter, as opposed to the prequel we're reviewing today, which is a 2D hack and slash. That, and it should be noted that Poppyworks only worked on this prequel. The original game was made by Accolade. Slave Zero X opens in a grody concrete basement. Sho, the main character, approaches an imposing door guarded by some guy. Sho tells him to fuck off, so he does. After that, he enters the chamber, and this is where we see the Slave Zero. He steals it, or something. Next we get a tutorial, and by tutorial I mean a glorified instruction booklet. The screen fades in as a couple cops do a police brutality.
Justice is divine.
Sho shows up.
Commander Frank, I'll eat you!
And does what everyone on Twitter tells you they would do in this situation. Here players take control of Sho, the big gay biomechanical badass. As Sho glides through oceans of blood, the losers he stole the slave suit from contact him.
Sho! What have you done?
Shut that up.
But Sho doesn't give a fuck, he just wants to kill shit. Sho is kind of an asshole. This is how 90% of the game's story is presented. By the way, good luck paying attention to most of it. This game is relentless, and the players will always be focusing on what's happening on screen instead of trying to listen to dialogue. Finally, after killing this bunch of faceless goons, players are hit with a level cleared screen, with a grade of their performance. Next, players can choose to continue the game, go to the shop, check the leaderboards, or return to the menu. Since the shop is the only thing that matters here, let's go over it. Welcome to Cyberpunk Morshoe's shop. Here, players can purchase upgrades and consumables, as well as some palette swaps for show and graphic filters. The next level starts with show being cringe edgy. This is DeviantArt OC shit. Periodically, the game will have really lame dialogue like this. It completely takes me out of the experience personally, but it might go a bit further for you. About halfway through this stage, players can get access to a mid-level shop. These appear sporadically throughout the game and serve the same purpose as between-level shops, but are obviously here more for convenience when it comes to buying heals and consumables. There's also a mini-boss at the end of this level. He's actually pretty easy to take out. Can I just say that I love the design of the characters in this game? Everyone here just looks awful, and it's beautiful. I'll have more on that later. The next stage is a simple elevator stage. I have a hard-on for elevator and train top stages in action games. I don't know bro, it's just that additional momentum. I love seeing an elevator rise as the player overcomes challenges, seeing the background fly by as you beat the shit out of a bunch of punks in or on top of a train is a rush. So you'd think that I'd love this. But this is actually where some of the issues in the game start to bleed through. This is nowhere near as nasty as things will get in the late game, but it's here where it first becomes noticeable that the dev's idea of challenge is simply throwing a metric fuckton of enemies at the player. After the obscenely long elevator segment, another douchebag wearing a fancy biomechanical slave suit shows up and beats the shit out of Show.
A guardian. That defective slave unit.
Then suddenly a bunch of weirdos pop up on the TV and start bickering with each other.
You must have thought this slave unit would bring you power. But power is nothing without control.
Anavaka! Well done, young man. But the residential sector is under my jurisdiction. The defense force will take things from here in the name of justice and liberty for all.
General Foreman, Artavaka is the final triumph of our holy leader, and as such, supersedes all territorial claims.
Regent Fuguan, of course, I must have been blinded by my sense of duty.
Is it true? A pilot and a slave have risen against our holy father? Uriel, nothing to worry about, my boy. Just a poor, misguided fool and a defective slave unit. Improperly disposed of, it would seem. Trot along now, let your elders sort this out.
This is ridiculous. The first Guardian sighted in years, and Artavaka just gets to kill it. It could have valuable secrets.
These 5 people will be the targets the player will be facing going forward. Fancy Boy has an episode of Tard Rage, and Show uses this as an opportunity to escape. The stage ends and we're shown a cutscene of Show and some red-haired guy flirting. Welcome to the other 10% of the storytelling. This is the general flow of Slave Zero X, for better or worse. Since the player is playing a badass, they will have an assortment of moves to dispatch their enemies. Right from the get-go, all abilities minus some consumables are unlocked. I found this to be a little disappointing, as I like to flesh out movesets as I progress through a game. The combat appears deceivingly simplistic, but it's actually very technical. Players have access to light and heavy attacks, a dodge, as well as combos to string all of these together. The primary goal of combat is to continue juggling enemies until their color palette either darkens or they explode into giblets. Under the HP bar is the X meter. The X meter allows for the use of Fatal Pulse and X moves. Fatal Pulse serves as a way to extend combos. On the other hand, X moves are powerful combos that require precise button pressing and are not easy to pull off. I usually activated these on accident and didn't rely on them much. Alternatively, players also have access to Fatal Sync. Fatal Sync can be activated once the player completely fills the X meter. Fatal Sync makes Show's attacks faster, but more importantly, it enables the ability to heal. As Show does more damage, players will see blue shit building within the health bar. This is the potential amount of health recovered. Show won't actually recover health until Fatal Sync ends, either on its own or the player cancels it. Under the X meter is the Burst Orb. The Burst Orb can be used as a way to break out of a stun lock, which will happen a lot in this game. It can also be used to instantly access Fatal Sync. A good player can basically play the game entirely in Fatal Sync. I am not a good player. Finally, next to the Burst Orb is the Ordnance Stock. These are items Show can toss out to damage enemies and further extend combos.
God! Asshole! Oh! Ugh. You want this?
Hey, boy. Pilot kick back. Holy crap, that's a gun.
Oh no, my cool jacket.
Who are you?
I'm Santa Claus.
But it's June. Oh my god! What did you do?
What the hell did you do to my family?
Tell Epstein, nerd says hello.
Alright, with all that information out of the way, how does Slave Zero X actually feel to play? Well, this is where things get a little messy. Slave Zero X is a game that sounds more fun than it actually is. The game is an interesting combination of 2D side-scrolling action and fighting games. However, due to some developer choices, the game can easily cross over into a rage-inducing, unenjoyable experience. I previously stated that the dev's idea of difficulty is swarming the players with a crap ton of enemies, and that's pretty much the gist of it. Instead of asking players to find different ways of tackling enemies, they are told to juggle an ever-increasing amount of cannon fodder. Yeah, sure, some enemies have different movesets, but when there's 50 other guys on the screen, it's kinda hard to differentiate them. The standout enemy types are the enemies with the special armor. This makes it so they have to be damaged into a state of vulnerability and then juggled. 70 to 80% of my deaths in this game were due to one enemy hitting me and then the other slapping me around until my health bar is the size of Donald Trump's hands.
I'm gonna come.
The stun locking in this game is brutal, and players only have one real avenue of getting out of it without getting thrown back into yet another bout of juggling. That is using the Burst Orb, and it's not always readily available. It takes a decent amount of time to build up.
Bruh.
So one mistake can literally kill you when you have 50 guys who are ready to butt fuck you into oblivion. This is for two reasons. Show has an incredibly limited amount of iframes to the point where they're barely noticeable. And 2, every single time the player is hit by an enemy, no matter how weak that attack is, Sho becomes staggered, which opens him up to even more punishment. The game isn't doing itself any favors with the checkpoints either. They're not always bad, but given how long some segments can be, since enemies are all damage sponges and some encounters last 2 to 4 waves, it can make getting cucked out of progress maddening. About halfway through the game, players will start engaging in combat with some, body horror things. The best way I could describe the design of these dudes is Slender Man meets Evangelion, and the Flood just happened to be there too. That's not to say that these designs are bad, I actually love them. All of the cannon fodder enemies, these have the most unique movesets. Despite this, they still wind up with many of the same faults as the first group has. The boss fights in Slave Zero aren't too much better, but at least there are usually one-on-one fights. This gives players the much-needed breathing room to learn the animations to properly prepare and counter incoming attacks. They still are brutally difficult, and players will be punished when they fail to adapt.
Falcon Punch!
I originally stated what drew me into this game was the PS1 styled aesthetic, and I'm glad to say that I'm pleased with it. On a personal note, I'm so glad that we've got to the point where this aesthetic is becoming more and more mainstream. Ever since indie games started popularizing retro-styled graphics, I knew people would start to appreciate the early 3D era of gaming. The art team did such a great job in depicting cyberpunk-styled atmosphere in the vein of retro 3D graphics. The gloomy gray streets enhance the feeling of oppression, the walls are plastered with posters and propaganda, and the streets are littered with refuse. As the game continues, the players will not only traverse the city, but ride a train, get chased by some weirdo, break into rich people's palaces, and fight God. The sprite work is also well made. Sho himself has a cool design, but I really jive with the opposing force, the biomechanical Nazis, if you will. The gas masks, the oil-laden industrialization, it's fucking metal as hell. I don't know what this aesthetic is called, but I love it. I also want to gush a little bit about the slave suits for a moment. As a fan of Bubblegum Crisis and its hard suits, it's great to see games putting their own spin on exoskeletons. Slave Zero X also has a magnificent soundtrack, especially if you're a fan of chillwave and drum and bass. A lot of these tracks go way too hard and it's glorious. It hits that aesthetic perfectly. If I had to describe it, I'd say it kinda reminds me of the old Unreal Tournament soundtracks combined with some classic Phantasy Star Online songs. If you're into atmospheric soundtracks, you'll appreciate this one, even if most of the time they get drowned out by swords clanging, explosions, and screams. I've been using the soundtrack of this game during the review portions of this video, so now you know what you've been listening to. The voice acting is another thing of note. I have to say that I loved off-brand Senator Thompson over here.
Do you know what I find most disgusting about this world, Guardian? Is that it didn't have to be this way. The American Empire was committed to bringing freedom and prosperity to every nation until there was only one nation under God. But there are always those who can't help but transgress.
The voice actor did a fantastic job of portraying him. All the other voice actors did a good job too, and no complaints here. I think it's safe to say that the art and music actually carries this game. As for the story itself, it's really not worth mentioning, as it doesn't really do anything to make itself stand out. At various points throughout the game, the dialogue falls into like cringe edgy or starts to feel like a Redditor wrote it. It's written by Miles Luna, who also wrote for RWBY, so I guess that kind of explains why the story's lacking. It appears Luna wishes to tell a deep philosophical story. However, more often than not, it falls flat. To give credit where credit is due, he is trying to do this with a genre that isn't really known for having deep narratives. Ultimately, I think his writing style would be better suited for a Telltale game, rather than an action game inspired by Devil May Cry. Then again, no one really plays these kind of games for the story, so that shouldn't bother people. What should bother people is the gameplay. And while there are moments of fun to be had here, there are equally, if not more, frustrating ones. I've played difficult games before. Gravity Circuit was my game of the year last year. It's a fairly difficult game, but I never felt like I was getting fucked over by bullshit. The same can be said about my escapades through the Devil May Cry series. I cannot say that's the case for Slave 0X. Of course, I'm comparing apples to oranges here, but I'm hard-pressed to find a good example of a 2D hack and slash that plays like a spectacle fighter. Some folks out there might consider my complaints about Slave 0X to be a mere skill issue. However, after playing the game to completion and letting it sink in a little bit, I came to the conclusion that I really didn't enjoy this game. At the end of the day, Slave 0X is an aesthetically pleasing game that features a high skill floor with the brutal difficulty to go with it. If you think you'd like this game, I'll have a link in the description below. Yeah, like I said, all of them. I don't care if she was 5. I couldn't have any witnesses anyway. Well, hopefully the next asshole that gets in won't keep raising my taxes like this one. I swear, I would have done this job for free.
Hey, it's Catnip. Nerd's making a move.
Ah, yes. Make sure he realizes his true purpose.